Rest stop encounters. There's something about rest stops that most folks never put into words, though everybody feels it, somewhere deep in the animal brain. It's that peculiar mix of emptiness and exposure, like being stranded in a fishbowl under buzzing fluorescent lights. The highway roars in the distance, semis grumbling by like prehistoric beasts, but the little square of pavement and brick that calls itself a rest area is cut off from everything else. Time doesn't move the same way there. You feel it the moment you pull in off the interstate. Whether it's midnight or noon, the air inside those rest stops always feels stale, sour, as if 100 tired travelers breathed the life out of it before you. I remember the first time I realized how wrong they felt. I was on a long-haul drive from Amarillo to Tulsa, pushing midnight, the kind of drive where the radio fuzzes out into static, your eyes blur, and the asphalt keeps stretching forever. I pulled off at a rest stop somewhere outside Oklahoma City. A big sign with peeling paint promised clean facilities and 24-hour security, which sounded reassuring enough when my bladder was ready to burst. But the second my tires rolled onto the cracked lot, I felt it, that prickling pressure along the back of my neck. The building was lit up, sure, but the lights weren't right. Too bright, too yellow, throwing long shadows against the vending machines. I remember thinking how it looked less like a safe haven for travelers and more like a stage, a place designed for you to walk into a spotlight while something in the dark watched. The lot was mostly empty, just one beat-up sedan with no plates, parked crooked across two spaces. No driver, no sound of an engine cooling. I thought maybe some drunk had left it there, but when I passed it, I noticed the driver's door was cracked open half an inch, just enough to whisper wrongness. Inside, the car looked gutted, fast food wrappers, an old child's blanket balled on the back seat, and something else I couldn't quite place. A smell, faint, metallic, that trickled out as if carried on a ghost's breath. I should have left right then. Any sane man would have. But road exhaustion does funny things to your instincts. It dulls them, makes you think you're imagining things, makes you ignore the voice that whispers, "Don't go in. Don't." So I parked, climbed out, and walked into that rest stop. That was the night I understood, rest stops aren't places to rest. They're places that wait. Inside, the place smelled like mop water gone sour, that rank perfume of bleach just strong enough to cover whatever came before it. The lobby was bare, two soda machines humming with the persistence of insects, a rack of brochures advertising zoos, caves, casinos, all curling at the edges from neglect. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed and flickered in an uneven rhythm, like they were on the verge of dying but clung to life out of spite. The restroom doors were on the far side of the lobby, men's to the left, women's to the right. That's when I noticed the bulletin board beside them. At first glance it was the usual clutter, missing pet flyers, a church fundraiser, some outdated notice about construction delays. But underneath the layers, half hidden by thumbtacks, was a paper that stopped me cold. It was a missing person flyer, but old, yellowed, corners curled, the photograph faded to a sepia blur. A woman, early 30s maybe, smiling stiffly into the camera. Across the bottom, the words "last seen at I-40 rest stop, 1998. Someone had scrawled over the date in black marker, replacing it with "still waiting." My stomach nodded. I don't scare easy, but there was something about that flyer, the way it hadn't been taken down, the way someone had bothered to change the date, that made the air feel suddenly heavier. Like the whole building had shifted, leaning in closer. I pushed through the men's room door, telling myself I was being paranoid. The bathroom was empty, or seemed empty, though the echo in there had a thickness to it, as if another set of lungs were pulling in air just behind me. The mirrors above the sinks were smeared, and for a second I thought I saw someone moving in the reflection, a shape, tall and stooped, but when I spun around, there was only the row of stalls. One was shut, the farthest one against the wall. My gut clenched. I don't know why that single closed stall door felt like a warning, but it did. The silence was total. No rustle of clothing, no shifting of feet, not even a breath. Just that door, shut too neatly, like a coffin lid. I forced myself to the urinal, hands trembling. I tried to tell myself someone was in there, maybe asleep, maybe passed out drunk. But I knew better. Every instinct in me screamed that if I so much as crouched to look under that stall door, I'd see something I wasn't supposed to. Something that might crouch down too, and look back. I finished fast, washed my hands, and bolted for the door. But just before it swung closed, I heard it, a soft, dragging sound, like bare feet moving slow across tile. I hit the lobby fast, heart thudding against my ribs like a caged bird, but when I looked around, nothing had changed. Same buzzing lights, same rack of brochures, same stale air. The sedan outside was still there too, its driver's door cracked open like a mouth mid-whisper. But the sound, that dragging shuffle, was still echoing in my ears. I tried to tell myself it was imagination, some trick of exhaustion, but the body knows better than the mind sometimes. I didn't feel safe. I didn't even feel alone. And yet, instead of sprinting for my truck like any sane man should have, I lingered. Maybe it was stubbornness, maybe it was the gnawing suspicion that leaving too quickly might make me seem like prey to whatever lingered in the shadows. You ever get that? That primal sense that you're being observed, and the only thing keeping the eyes at bay is pretending you don't notice them? That's how it felt. I walked slowly toward the vending machines, every step echoing louder than it should have, like the floor had turned into a drumhead beneath me. I studied the glass fronts of the machines, not for candy bars or soda, but for reflections. And there it was. Not clear, not obvious, but enough. In the warped glare of the vending machine's glass, a shape stood just behind me. Too tall, too thin, head cocked at an angle that no human head should tilt. Its outline seemed fluid, like smoke trying to remember the shape of a man. I froze, staring at that reflection, afraid to turn around, afraid to confirm it was really there. My skin prickled with sweat, every hair on my arms rising in silent alarm. And then, blink. The lights above flickered once, twice, and the reflection was gone. Just me, pale and shaking, alone in the glass. Except I knew I hadn't been alone. I spun, fists clenched, ready for, what? A junkie, a prankster, some night janitor? But there was nothing there. Just the empty lobby, the crooked posters, the dead air pressing against my ears. That was worse, in a way. Because if you see something, at least you know what you're up against. When it's gone, when it leaves no trace, that's when the fear festers deepest. That's when you realize it isn't bound by rules you understand. I headed for the door, quick but not running, the way you move when you don't want to provoke a dog that might bite. The night air outside hit me like a wave, cool and sharp. Relief washed through me, until I noticed the sedan again. The driver's door wasn't just cracked anymore. It was wide open. The open door yawned at me, black and bottomless, like the car itself had become a hole in the night. I stood there on the cracked concrete, the hum of the highway fading to nothing in my ears, waiting for some sign of life. A cough, the scrape of a shoe, even a breath. Nothing. The interior was swallowed in shadows, though the lot lights should have lit it up. It was like the darkness inside that car had its own gravity, pulling in every photon and keeping it prisoner. Against all reason, I stepped closer. Curiosity, they say, is what kills the cat, but it's something darker that drags a man forward when every bone in his body is begging him to stop. I leaned down, peered into the driver's seat. Empty. The fast food wrappers were still there, the blanket, and that same coppery tang in the air, stronger now, clinging to the back of my throat. I should have pulled away right then, but my eyes were drawn to the back seat, where the blanket lay bunched like a small body curled in sleep. My hand, as if not my own, reached for it, fingers brushing the cheap, matted fleece. It was warm. Too warm. Like someone had just been lying there. A sound tore through the night then, low and guttural, a noise that didn't belong to any animal I'd ever heard. It came from behind me, close, so close I felt the vibration in my spine. I spun, but the lot was empty, stretching out under the jaundiced light. No person, no beast, no movement. And yet the echo of that growl clung to the air, circling me like a predator just out of sight. My pulse jackhammered in my throat, each beat a drum of panic. I stumbled back from the car, eyes darting between the trees lining the lot and the darkened restroom building. That's when I noticed something carved into the side of the sedan, deep gouges running along the metal like claws had raked across it. for parallel lines, jagged, tearing down the length of the door. Fresh enough that flakes of paint curled outward. The sight rooted me to the spot, my brain refusing to process. I wanted to believe it was vandalism, kids with a key or a screwdriver, but no key makes cuts like those. I backed away slowly, fighting the urge to sprint for my truck. Because somewhere in the night, I felt it, eyes, watching, following every step. And I knew, with a certainty that made my skin crawl, that whatever left those marks wasn't finished. I forced myself to move, slow at first, then faster, until my boots scuffed against the cracked asphalt as I made for my truck. My keys rattled in my hand, slick with sweat, the sound unnaturally loud in the stillness. That's when I heard it again, that dragging sound I'd first caught in the bathroom. Only now it was outside, behind me, scraping across the pavement with the weight of something heavy. I didn't dare turn around. My truck was maybe 30 yards away, but every step felt like pushing through molasses, my body sluggish, my chest tight. The air seemed thicker, heavier, charged with a kind of static that prickled at my skin. The dragging came closer, steady, unhurried, like whatever followed me knew it didn't need to rush. It already had me. I fumbled with the keys at the door, every nerve screaming to look back, to confirm what I felt breathing down my neck. Against my better judgment, I glanced over my shoulder. For half a second, no more, I saw it. A figure, impossibly tall, its head grazing the glowing lot light. Limbs too long, bent wrong, as though joints had been added where they didn't belong. Its skin, or what passed for skin, looked like wet parchment stretched too thin, veins pulsing just beneath. The face, if you could call it that, was blurred, shifting like heat haze, but the eyes. God help me, the eyes burned white, holes of light that bored into me. I must have made a sound, a strangled noise of terror, because the thing stopped moving. It stood there, cocking its head, watching as if curious what I'd do next. And then it smiled. Not with lips, there weren't any, but with its whole body. The limbs stretched wider, the posture bending backward in a grotesque arch, the skin tearing at the seams as it unfolded itself like a nightmare origami. My knees buckled. Somehow, by some animal instinct, I wrenched the door open, dove inside, and slammed it shut. The cab of the truck felt like a coffin, but at least it was my coffin. My hands shook as I jammed the key into the ignition, praying the engine wouldn't stall, praying the headlights would pierce the dark enough to prove I hadn't lost my mind. The truck roared to life, and for a heartbeat, relief swept through me. Then came the sound, 3 sharp rakes across the side panel, claws on metal, deep enough that I felt the shutter vibrate through the seat. I screamed, slammed the gearshift, and peeled out of that rest stop with tires shrieking, the open road swallowing me like a lifeline. But in the mirror, God, in the mirror, I swear I saw it still standing under the lot light, watching me vanish into the night. And it wasn't moving. It didn't need to. Because somehow, I knew that wasn't the last time I'd see it. The highway should have felt like safety, a river of blacktop pulling me away from that cursed rest stop. But it didn't. Every mile marker I passed only deepened the dread sitting heavy in my gut, like I'd carried something with me when I left. The night outside my windshield wasn't the same night I'd driven through earlier. It felt denser, pressing in against the glass, swallowing the beams of my headlights before they reached the road. I kept glancing in the mirrors, telling myself I'd see nothing but asphalt and empty lanes, but each time my stomach tightened, bracing for those white eyes to flare in the dark. For a while, it was only the hum of the tires, the throb of the engine, and my own ragged breathing. I almost convinced myself it had stayed behind. Almost. That's when the radio crackled. Static first, loud enough to make me jump, then a thin, garbled voice slipping through like it was crawling out of the wires themselves. I couldn't make out the words, just the cadence, a woman's voice, broken, pleading. I twisted the knob, but the static didn't change. Louder, softer, the voice remained, whispering things I wasn't supposed to hear. Then, beneath it, came another sound, the faint drag of something heavy across concrete, the same sound I'd heard in the restroom, in the lot, everywhere. My throat went dry. My knuckles whitened on the wheel. I told myself to shut the damn radio off, yank the cord out if I had to, but I couldn't move. It was like the sound had sunk its claws into me, rooting me in place. And then the headlights flickered. Once, twice, then steadied, but in that instant of darkness, when the world outside was reduced to black glass, I saw it in the reflection of the windshield. Not behind me on the road, not in the back seat, inside the glass itself. Its face pressed against the surface, features warped by the curve, those white eyes burning inches from my own. I tore my gaze away, slammed the radio off, and floored the gas, the engine screaming as the speedometer climbed. 90, 95, 100. The road blurred under me, the truck rattling like it might tear apart. But no matter how fast I went, the air in the cab felt heavy, crowded, as though I wasn't alone anymore. I didn't dare look at the windshield again. Some truths are worse than lies, and one glimpse had already carved itself into me that I drove like that for miles, maybe hours, it's hard to say. Time on the highway unravels when you're running from something you can't name. I thought if I could just make it to the next town, see the glow of gas station lights, the shape of another living soul, I'd be free. But the exits rolled by empty, signs pointing to places that didn't exist, the road stretching on like it had been rewritten just for me. That's when the fuel gauge caught my eye. I'd filled up before leaving Amarillo, a full tank, but the needle was sinking fast, unnaturally fast, like something was draining it. I swore, slapped the dash, but the gauge kept falling, sinking toward it. And as it dropped, the cab of the truck grew colder. My breath fogged in front of me, clinging to the glass. Then the smell hit me, that same copper tang from the sedan, thick and suffocating, filling my lungs until I gagged. I tried rolling down the window, but it wouldn't budge, the crank stuck fast like the truck itself had turned against me. The steering wheel vibrated beneath my hands, and for a second I felt another pulse in it. Not mechanical, but alive, like I was gripping something with veins. My headlights caught a green highway sign then, looming out of the dark, rest area, 1 mile. Relief should have come, but instead, dread flooded me. My chest tightened, my vision blurred. I pressed harder on the gas, telling myself I'd pass it, keep going, never stop. But the truck had other plans. The engine coughed, sputtered, and with a sick lurch, began to die. I slammed the wheel, screaming at the machine like it could hear me, like it cared, but it was useless. The lights dimmed, the tires slowed, and with a final shuddering groan, the truck coasted to a stop. I looked up through the windshield and there it was, the glow of another rest stop ahead, identical to the one I'd fled. Same crooked lights, same squat brick building, same parking lot yawning like an open mouth. My heart froze as realization settled in. I hadn't escaped. I'd been driving in circles, dragged back by something that wanted me here. The dragging sound came again, louder this time, scraping right outside the truck, circling the cab like a shark scenting blood. I sat frozen, hands gripping the dead wheel, watching as the shadows outside began to move, pulling themselves into shapes too tall, too thin, too wrong. And in that moment, staring at the impossible, I understood the truth. The rest stop wasn't just a place. It was a trap. A mouth that opened when the night was darkest, hungry for the lost and the weary. And it had me. The first thing I noticed when the truck died was the silence. Not the normal kind, the kind you get when the engine cuts off and the night fills in. No, this was deeper, thicker, a silence that swallowed even the sound of my own breath. I opened my mouth, maybe to curse, maybe to pray, but no sound came out. My chest rose and fell, but it was like the air refused to carry the noise. Outside, the lot stretched under that same jaundiced glow, though I swear I could still see the shape of the last rest stop miles behind me, as if both existed at once. I sat there gripping the steering wheel, trying not to look, but my eyes betrayed me, drifting to the mirrors. In the side glass, the lot was empty. In the rear view, it wasn't. Something moved back there, tall shadows peeling away from the edge of the trees, too fluid to be men, too deliberate to be wind. They moved like dancers, long limbs unfolding, snapping back into place with jerks that made my stomach lurch. I shut my eyes tight, told myself not to watch, but the silence pressed harder, demanding I acknowledge it. The dragging sound started again, closer than ever, like whatever made it was tracing lazy circles around the truck. Metal screeched as something scraped the bumper, slow and deliberate, the way a child drags a stick along a picket fence. My body wanted to curl into itself, but I forced my hands off the wheel, forced them down to the door handle. It was locked. Of course it was locked. I'd locked it the second I'd climbed in. But when I pressed the unlock, the mechanism refused to budge. The button rattled uselessly under my thumb. My breath quickened, fogging the glass, and for one panicked second I thought about just staying there, sealing myself in, waiting until morning. Then the windshield darkened. Something leaned over the cab, blotting out the lot light, pressing its face against the glass. White eyes burned inches from mine, bright enough to leave afterimages scorched into my vision. Its skin wasn't skin at all. It writhed, alive, shifting like maggots under parchment. And then it exhaled. A long, slow breath that fogged the inside of the windshield, not the outside. I scrambled backward across the seat, clawing at the passenger door, but it was no use. The locks were dead, welded shut by some force I couldn't see. My fists pounded against the window, the thud of flesh on glass swallowed by that suffocating silence. Not even an echo. The thing outside, or inside, or both, I couldn't tell anymore, watched me with those searing white eyes. They weren't eyes the way ours are. They weren't for seeing. They were holes punched into reality itself, portals leading somewhere I didn't want to imagine. As I stared, caught like a moth in their glow, images flooded my head. Not thoughts, not memories, images. A man stumbling out of a rest stop bathroom in 1976, never to be seen again. A family huddled in their station wagon in 1989, screaming without sound as shadows climbed through the windows. Truckers, travelers, drifters, all swallowed by the same place, the same hunger. I saw their faces twist, stretch, dissolve, until they weren't faces anymore, just empty shells walking the halls of that brick building, forever circling. My skull throbbed, my teeth buzzed as if the visions were vibrating through bone. I wrenched my gaze away, choking on bile, and that broke the spell, if only for a moment. The lot was empty again. No figure on the windshield, no glowing eyes. Just me, shaking, drenched in sweat. I tried the ignition one more time, desperation making me sloppy, but the key only ground uselessly. Then the headlights flickered on of their own accord. They flared once, twice, and settled, beaming straight at the squat building of the rest stop. Only it wasn't squat anymore. It had grown. Stretched. The brick had elongated upward, impossibly high, windows yawning open where there hadn't been any before, each one a gaping black socket. I swear I could hear whispers leaking from them, faint at first, then louder, a chorus of the same pleading voice I'd heard through the radio. "Still waiting," they said. "Still waiting." My body moved before my brain agreed, hand clutching the door handle. And this time, it opened. The night air hit me like a lungful of ice water, burning cold, sharp enough to sting my throat. I stumbled out of the truck, legs weak, every instinct screaming at me to climb back in, lock the doors, pretend none of this was happening. But the truck wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to the silence, the shadows, the thing that breathed through my windshield. The lot stretched wider than before, the cracked pavement seeming to roll out into the trees like fresh tar poured over the earth. My boots scraped on it, each step echoing too loud, too hollow, as though the ground was thinner than it should be, something brittle laid over an endless void. I forced myself to look at the building. It loomed at the edge of the lot, taller now, wrong, the angles bent in ways my eyes couldn't settle on. The windows gaped like wounds, lightless, and yet I felt them watching me, dozens of unseen eyes crawling over my skin. Somewhere deep inside, the rational part of my brain whispered that if I just kept walking, if I ignored the building and made for the trees, I might find the real road, the real night. But another part, a darker, heavier pull, dragged me forward toward those doors. It wasn't curiosity. It wasn't courage. It was compulsion, like gravity, like being reeled in by a hook buried in my chest. My feet carried me across the lot, even as my hands trembled, even as tears stung the corners of my eyes. The dragging sound began again, not behind me this time, but beneath me, under the pavement, like something enormous crawled just below the skin of the earth, keeping pace with every step I took. When I reached the door, I realized it had no handle. Just smooth, stained metal, cold and unyielding. And yet, when I raised my hand, hesitant, shaking, the door swung open as if it had been waiting. The stench rolled out first, copper and rot, thick enough to make me gag. Then came the air itself, heavy and damp, pressing against my face like a hand. I stepped inside because I couldn't do anything else. Behind me, the door shut without a sound. And that's when I understood, truly understood, that I hadn't escaped the rest stop at all. I'd only gone deeper into it. The interior was nothing like the building I'd stepped into before. The lobby was gone. No soda machines, no brochure rack, no buzzing fluorescents. Instead, I stood in a hallway that stretched farther than it should have, too narrow, too long, the walls sweating with moisture like the inside of a throat. The floor sloped downward just slightly, enough that I felt myself leaning into it, like the whole place was ushering me deeper whether I wanted to go or not. Dim lights buzzed overhead, single bulbs dangling from cords, but they didn't give off steady light. They pulsed, throbbing in a rhythm that reminded me of a heartbeat. With each pulse, the shadows along the walls seemed to swell and contract, as though the corridor itself was breathing. My footsteps echoed, though I swear I wasn't walking alone. The sound of other feet, bare, wet, dragging, kept pace with mine, just a half beat behind. I turned once, quick, hoping to catch whatever followed me, but the hall behind was empty, stretching away into black. The only thing I saw was a smear on the wall, dark and glistening. I stepped closer and saw it was a handprint. Child size. The fingers were elongated, claw-like, smeared downward as if the hand had slid or been pulled. The bile rose in my throat, but I kept moving, because stopping didn't feel like an option. The hallway bent suddenly, too sharp to be natural, and opened into a wider chamber. At first, I thought it was empty. Then the light pulsed again and I saw them. Figures, dozens of them, lined up against the far wall. They stood motionless, heads tilted at angles that made my neck ache just to look at. Their faces were wrong, blurred, features sliding off like wet paint, mouths stretched open but silent. Some wore clothes, old, tattered, travel-worn. I recognized one shirt immediately, the same pattern as the woman in the faded missing poster. My stomach twisted and I stumbled backward. Not one of them moved. Not one made a sound. But their heads, every single one, turned to follow me as I stepped deeper into the chamber. And in the far corner, just barely visible in the stuttering glow, was another door. The dragging sound started again, this time inside the chamber, circling me, though none of the figures had moved. I tried to keep my eyes forward on the door in the far corner, but the figures against the wall pulled at my attention like magnets. Every pulse of the hanging bulbs made them clearer, sharper, and each time I looked they seemed just a little closer. Not by movement. There was no shifting, no shuffle of feet, but by degrees, like reality itself was redrawing them when I blinked. Their mouths hung wide, but not in screams. They looked more like tunnels, dark holes that opened straight into nothing. And behind those holes, I swear I heard whispers, muffled, desperate, like 100 voices talking at once through water. I forced myself forward, one step at a time, heart slamming against my ribs. Halfway across the chamber, the air changed. It thickened, grew warmer, carrying that same metallic tang I'd smelled in the sedan. My throat tightened, stomach heaved, but I didn't dare gag, didn't dare make a sound. Because I'd realized what these things were. They weren't ghosts. They weren't corpses, not exactly. They were echoes, trapped pieces of the travelers who'd gone missing here, peeled away and pinned to the walls like insects in a collection. Some of the clothes dated back decades, others modern, but the eyes, or where eyes should have been, were always blank. White holes, not unlike the thing I'd seen outside. I don't know if those people had been eaten, hollowed, or simply erased, but the residue remained, standing in rows, waiting for the next soul to join them. My legs almost gave out, but the door in the corner was close now, maybe 10 steps away. I pushed forward, refusing to look at the rows again. That's when one of them moved. Just barely. A twitch of the hand, a spasm in the wrist. I froze. Another moved, head jerking to the side in a way that made a cracking sound echo through the chamber. Then another. And another. One by one, the echoes peeled off the wall, joints snapping into motion, and started to shuffle toward me. Their mouths stretched wider, impossibly wide, the whispers swelling into a wave of sound. Not words, but hunger. The chamber filled with the sound of them, that wet shuffle of bare feet and the rising chorus of whispers that weren't quite human speech. My chest locked tight, panic surging hot through my veins, but I forced myself to move. The door, 10 steps, maybe less, was the only chance. I sprinted, boots slapping against the slick floor, arms pumping, my own ragged breathing mixing with the hiss of their whispers. The figures moved faster now, breaking free of their crooked stillness, arms outstretched, fingers clawing at the air like they could already feel me in their grasp. I hit the door, slammed my shoulder against it, and to my shock it swung open without resistance. I stumbled through, nearly falling, and the door slammed shut behind me with a force that rattled my bones. Silence again. My gasps echoed in the dark space I'd entered. I pressed my back to the door, shaking, praying I'd sealed them off. The room was smaller than the chamber, though room wasn't the right word. The walls were curved, rounded, slick with something that glistened in the weak light. It felt organic, like I'd stepped into the belly of something alive. A low thrum vibrated through the walls, steady, relentless, like a heartbeat. My stomach turned as I realized it was a heartbeat. The building wasn't a building at all. It was a living thing, or maybe something older than life, wearing the disguise of a rest stop to lure people in. And I was inside it. I stumbled forward, gagging at the stench, until I reached the center of the room. There, sunk into the floor like an altar, was a pit. Not deep, only a few feet, but what lay inside froze the scream in my throat. Personal belongings. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Watches, wallets, wedding rings, children's toys, all jumbled together in a heap like offerings. Some were rusted, others fresh, gleaming as though their owners had dropped them only hours ago. And mixed in with the objects were bones. Too many bones. Skulls staring up with empty sockets, jaws frozen mid-silent scream. I staggered back, bow rising, but the heartbeat in the walls quickened, pounding harder, faster. The whispers seeped in again, leaking from the pit, curling into words I almost recognized. Join. Fit. Forever. My knees buckled, vision swimming. I clutched at my head, teeth grinding as if something inside my skull wanted out. That's when I felt it, fingers, cold and wet, sliding over my shoulder from behind. The touch was ice against my skin, yet wet, as though something had just crawled out of the pit and laid its hand on me. I spun, thrashing, but nothing stood there, only the curved, slick wall pulsing in rhythm with that monstrous heartbeat. But the handprint remained, smeared across my shoulder, a print too small to be human. My lungs burned as I staggered toward the opposite side of the room, searching desperately for another door, another crack, any escape. The whispers rose to a roar, layered voices overlapping, tugging at my thoughts, dragging me toward the pit. The belongings inside rattled, clinking together, rising like they were being lifted by invisible strings. Rings spun, coins clattered. A child's doll's head lolled toward me with glass eyes that gleamed in the pulsing light. My body fought itself, legs stumbling backward even as my chest strained forward, compelled by the voices. I dug my nails into my palms until blood ran, forcing myself to resist. The floor beneath me quivered, softening, and I realized with a jolt of horror that I was standing not on concrete but on flesh. A living surface, flexing, ready to open and swallow me whole. My scream ripped out, raw and useless. A flash from the wall behind the pit, faint at first, like a star seen through fog. I stumbled toward it, clawing at the slick surface. It wasn't a light. It was a window. Beyond it, impossibly far yet impossibly close, I saw the world outside. The highway, the endless stretch of asphalt, a truck passing by, its headlights slicing through the night. Salvation. I pounded at the wall, screaming, begging, though I knew they couldn't hear me. The voices in the pit rose higher, shrieking now, furious, and the belongings inside lifted into the air, bones rattling, objects spinning in a cyclone. A skull flew past my face, shattering against the wall. I hurled myself at the window with all the strength left in me. For a heartbeat, I felt resistance, the wall clinging to me like tar, dragging me back. But desperation tore me through. My body exploded into cold air, collapsing onto gravel, coughing, sobbing, the night sky above me vast and merciless. I turned, gasping, to look behind. The rest stop was there. Perfectly normal. Fluorescent lights humming, soda machines buzzing, a clean brick building squatting by the highway as if nothing had ever been wrong. But the window was gone. No pit. No heartbeat. Just the facade of safety. A truck honked as it passed, headlights painting me in yellow for an instant. I scrambled to my feet, shaking, and without a second thought sprinted for my car. I drove until dawn, until the highway blurred, until my hands cramped on the wheel. I never stopped again, not for coffee, not for gas, not for anything. And still, when I close my eyes at night, I feel that wet hand on my shoulder. I hear the whispers promising forever. And sometimes, when I pass another rest stop in the dead of night, I swear I see faces in the windows. Not reflections. Not travelers. Faces watching. Waiting.